You're listening to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. We're joined by a very special guest this evening. Well, it's this evening when I'm recording it. I don't know if it'll be the evening when you're listening to it, and I don't care, but it is the evening now, so good evening. For a brief discussion of the comic book industry, and one of the cleverest ideas I've heard in quite a while, and a nice bit of resistance against the social justice incursion into comics. It is called a Clinton Cash. It is a graphic novel edition of a very heavily researched book by one of my colleagues at Breitbart, Peter Schweitzer. We're going to hear a little bit about that later. Now, the man responsible, Chuck Dixon, is a legendary comics writer who has been successful both at DC with a character you might have heard of called Batman, and even more so at Marvel with The Punisher, who is a sort of heavily armed straight version of me. Chuck, welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I'm very interested in asking you some questions about the industry, and then in the second half of the show about Clinton Cash. But let's get straight down to the thing everybody wants to hear about from you. How bad is the social justice, hand-wringing, and lunacy in the comic book industry?
It's as bad as it can get. Political correctness is the first consideration, and making the news feeds is the second consideration. And that's no way to run a comic book company.
So tell me, I'm confused by this because, some of the most brilliant creative minds, whether it's Stan Lee or, whatever, have been in the comics industry. But it seems like, it's a sad thing, comics, sci-fi, fantasy, all of these, industries have sort of fallen after an assault by these social justice warriors who say that, this is sexist and that is racist and we have to reboot, Iron Man and make it a woman and reboot this character and make it a black paraplegic lesbian, all the rest of it. Try to give me a sense of where this all came from, because it seems to me like if we lose that sort of extraordinary creativity and brilliance in comic books, it's going to have horrible ramifications for other sorts of art too. I mean, recent years we've seen how comic books can be turned very successfully and very brilliantly into big blockbuster Hollywood movies, and there are all sorts of other ways in which comic books affect art elsewhere. Tell us how this happened, first of all. When did you first start seeing it rear its head, and why do you think the comic book industry was vulnerable to this sort of social justice interference?
Well, comics are kind of, they don't sell the great numbers. They're not really, other than the movies and things like that and television shows. The comics themselves don't have as big an impact on pop culture as they used to. So they have a hard time getting media coverage. When they found out that by being outrageous, they could get media coverage. Back in the 90s, it started with, they killed Superman, and that got them on the nightly news. And they fell in love with the idea of being on the nightly news, how to outrage the public. And I started running in the 90s when they would start, well, what if this character was this, or what if this character was that, which I always rejected because They thought, well, we can get media coverage.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because I suppose on the one hand, in the 90s, it would have been outrageous to kill characters or to turn them into women or whatever. But now it seems like the changes they're making are in the direction that the media likes. They're not being outrageous. They're actually just completely conforming to, the sort of far left media lunacy. Because they're not going to get any criticism, are they, for turning Iron Man into a woman? They're only going to get applause. And I suppose maybe they've realized that that's a smart way to get attention. But tell me, I've looked at some of the numbers for these reboots. When they reboot, they make somebody black or Latina or lesbian or whatever. And they don't seem to perform very well after about issue 2, do they?
No, they don't, because they'll make someone, gay or Latino or Aborigine or Armenian, and that's all the character is. There's no character beneath it. If they created a good character, they might last a while and readers might begin to enjoy it. I always use the example from the 70s of, there was a character at DC called Black Lightning, and he was black, and that's it.
You couldn't make that these days, could you?
Yeah, no, and then there was a character Marvel called Luke Cage, who happened to be black, who was awesome.
Yeah.
And Luke Cage continued. I mean, he's going to have his own television show on Netflix because he was a great character. So they're putting their identity politics first and putting good comics second. Horrible idea.
It's weird, isn't it? I've read some of this stuff, and what wit there is in the dialogue is that sort of thin, mean, vindictive Twitter-style feminism, where they're sort of beating up the bad guys who are always men and all that kind of stuff. But they do seem to have replaced plot and character development with identity politics. What's the worst offense that's been committed in the comic book universe? What's the thing that they've vandalized that has upset you the most?
I can't think of anything they haven't vandalized. They've either changed the gender, changed the nationality, changed the racial makeup, or killed or crippled every single hero at some point, which is, ultimately it's not outrageous anymore. It's boring. Everybody's seen it a million times. We're tired of this. Damn it, leave Superman alone. Leave Spider-Man alone.
Why do you think they are doing this to existing characters rather than creating new characters who look like what they would like superheroes to look like? I mean, if you want a black woman, for instance, if you think it's important for political or social reasons to have a black woman as a superhero, why don't you just invent a new one? Why do they do it to existing? Is it because it feels to me, maybe this is just me, but it feels to me like it's a sort of deliberate middle finger, like it's sort of triumphalism. They're kind of saying, look what we can do to your beloved childhood hero. And that feels very mean and very unpleasant, sort of almost sociopathic to me. Help me understand, because you're in the industry, you understand the psychology of these people better. What's going on?
Well, first of all, they, for the most part, lack the imagination to create a new character. So they use the crutch of characters that are, 50, 60, 75 years old. And it's also cynical because if you create a new character who's whatever identity, whatever racial makeup, nobody's going to care. And they don't have enough faith in their own creative abilities and marketing abilities to make a brand new character work.
You think they're right to lack faith in their own abilities? You think that? You think the creativity?
Yes, they are.
Well, why has that happened? Why has the comic book industry lost all its talent? Is it just that there are, we've kind of created all the characters that could be created in that genre? Surely not, right? Why has the comic book industry lost its best talents? Why has it lost the creative people? Because it's not like they don't have money now. They have plenty of money, being hurled at them by Hollywood studios to make these movies. Where's the talent gone?
Well, I think the talent's there. You still have very talented creators, but you have the gatekeepers of editors and publishers who, basically, this is what we want. We want a lesbian Batwoman. And if you can't write that, go to hell. And
really
it's like,
how it works? That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that is absolutely, that is literally how it works.
So they'll come to people who, under normal circumstances would have been free to indulge their creativity, and they'll just say, right, make a lesbian Batman, something like that. You'll get instructions like that if you're a comic book creator.
Absolutely. They're following this Hollywood model now. And it used to be in comics. In comics, you basically just threw stuff against the wall, and if it's stuck, it's stuck. It's the wildest, seat of your pants kind of creative process comics is, because it's a guy writing and a guy drawing. It can't be simpler than that. But they've complicated it. So there's actually a pre-production process and reviews and turnaround. It's madness. Spider-Man was basically created in an afternoon, by two guys who desperately wanted to sell some comics.
Yeah.
And that's comics, it should be raw, but it's not anymore. And it's for the most part, there's islands of sanity, but for the most part, it's run by, grasping, cynical idiots.
So who are the good guys in comics? If people are out there and they're sort of thinking, well, who do I patronize? Because DC and Marvel have both gone off the deep end. Who are the good guys?
Ted Adams at IDW is, for me, a paragon of virtue and a paragon of sanity and reasonableness in comics. He's the big honcho at IDW, which is an independent publisher. Mm-hmm. He actually makes money as a comic book publisher, not relying on licensing. He's also the only guy in comics that I'll trust on a handshake. Sorry, everybody else, but I'll trust Ted on a handshake. and I have for years. He's a smart guerrilla marketer. He's never forgotten what comics are. And he's, my number one go-to guy. If I got a great idea for a comic, I go to Ted first.
I see. So I'm picking up, just because I'm perspicacious in that way, I'm picking up that you may not share some of the politics of your colleagues in the comic book industry, and you may therefore have had a bit of a rocky road in the last few years as comic books have gone so nutty. So I want you to tell me, what's your experience been like as the industry sort of, I presume you've got the politics you had 20 years ago, and you can tell me what they are in a minute, but I'm guessing that you're sitting roughly where you were when you started out, but the industry has moved away. What I suppose I want to know is, how have people treated you, and what has your experience been like in the industry? I've not played the victim, I'm a conservative, it's so awful, but just what has it been like?
Once they realized that I'm a conservative, there's a lot of assumptions made that, of course, I'm a homophobe and a bigot and a racist and I hate women. So you got to get past those assumptions. And the only way to do that is do good work. And, when I'm doing superheroes and mainstream stuff, I don't put my politics in the work because that's not what the reader's looking for when they pick up a Batman comic or a Punisher comic. They don't want to be lectured to. Mm-hmm. So I leave all that at the door. But, my personal politics are my personal politics. And, it used to be you could argue over lunch with your editors over global warming and then go back and just work. But now it's all personal and thin-skinned and, we don't want you around. You can't be in the clubhouse because you don't like the same music we do. So
do you feel a sort of policing going on where they're sort of trying to find out what positions you hold and see if you need to be ejected from the church?
Yeah, well, I mean, in comics, it's really a small town. They feel you out pretty quick, and the story gets around pretty quick. I mean, Marvel and DC are literally run by guys who went to the same comic book shop in Brooklyn.
Right.
And if you're not in that clique, it's hard to get really good work. And if your politics aren't right, it's impossible to get any work.
I see. And you've only managed because you have the sort of stature and talent that you have. Presumably, if you were coming into comic books now, and you were, let's say, averagely gifted, you think if you have the wrong politics and people find out, you just haven't got a hope in hell, right?
Yeah. Because a lot of people would shy away from you. It's less true at the independents. I mean, all of my work now is with the independent companies, who, they don't really care about the policies. They care, is the story funny or exciting, and did you hand it in on time?
The sort of things you imagine they perhaps ought to care about, rather than whether you're voting for Hillary Clinton or not.
Well, as Larry Hama once told me, he says, your characters are likable, your stories make sense, and you hand your work in on time, so they'll never forgive you. This was at Marvel.
Brilliant. Are you? That's funny. Are you worried about your legacy as an artist, as a creator? Are you worried, I don't know, you're going to wake up one day and they're going to turn the Punisher into a Black Lives Matter activist? I mean, do you care about that? Does that offend you as an artist? The fact that some of the work that you have done in the past might be gerrymandered for these unnecessarily petty political reasons?
Well, I mean, most of it already has been. I've seen my characters morphed into PC ciphers. So, but the thing is, once I'm done working on them, it's like watching your kids go off with another guy. It's like, the new daddy is here. So, I just don't pay any attention to it. Otherwise, I'd be crying myself to sleep every night.
But
so I just walk away from it, go on to the new work, move forward.
If you did pay attention to it, presumably it'd be quite upsetting.
Yes.
But you try.
the horrible.
Sorry, I feel like I'm asking you to relive childhood trauma. I don't want it to turn into some horrible therapy session where I'm dredging up your repressed false memories or something. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to press the issue. I'm just kind of, if it were me, I'd be sort of horrified. It's like somebody going back and rewriting my columns with like new politics and crapper jokes. I'd be horrified.
I feel like I'm at a convention now because I always get questions about things like that. Like, how do you feel about what they've done to your characters? I mean, I had a character I created that I really liked, that I really felt an affinity for. In DC, they had her raped, tortured, and murdered in the most gruesome fashion. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. Do you think it was on purpose?
Even more cynically, brought her back a couple of years later. So,
do you think that was a sort of middle finger to Chuck Dixon?
It's hard not to take personal. I mean, I did a book called Nightwing for years, and when I left it, they killed every single one of the supporting characters in the book and then nuked the city just in case they missed any.
Wow. So they're not subtle, are they? I mean, it's not like delicate shade, like sometimes you'll see in an interview. I'm reaching for a very gay analogy here, so I apologize in advance, but you'll see in an interview like Mariah Carey or something, she's asked about Jennifer Lopez and she'll just sort of give a bit of side eye, and toss the hair a little bit. It's not like subtle shade. This is like full on screw you. We're going to kill all your characters and nuke the city.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of giggling at the editorial meetings.
Yeah. Oh, God. So amazing. Well, having heard some of that, in the second half, after the break, we're going to come back and talk about your latest project, which is sort of like, I mean, in a way, it's your kind of triumphant middle finger. In a way, it's a sort of capitulation because you too are now all in on politics in your work. I sort of feel like the left has pushed you into this. They sort of forced your hand, made you do this. This is the project, I think, from which there is no going back for you. And we're going to talk about it. It's the graphic novel edition of Clinton Cash, Peter Schweitzer's New York Times best-selling book. So we'll be back in a moment to talk about that. That time of the show again, that time of the week again, when I get to be nice about our longest running and most loyal advertisers. Somehow, I don't know how, somehow I have failed to irritate TrueCar. They're still coming back for more, still advertising with us. Thank you to the folks at TrueCar. TrueCar can help you buy a used car in case at this stage of the show, after 15 episodes or whatever, you still don't know about them. If you're new, TrueCar is there for you if you want to make a sensible purchase of a used car. Now, I tell them over and over again, the only things I acquire second-hand are antiques and boyfriends. But for cars, well, you might want a used one. Now, getting back to the real point, the serious stuff, but if I've got notes here, and they keep telling me, every week I get told off for not sticking to the notes. So here we are. Getting back to cars, there are over 500,000 pre-owned vehicles available from TrueCar certified dealers nationwide. Whether you're looking to buy a new or a used one, you can get empowering upfront price information, discounts off the list price for used cars, and an overall better buying experience through our TrueCar certified dealer network. With TrueCar, you'll see what other people paid for the car you want, so you can shop confidently, knowing you'll get a fair price. TrueCar helps you connect with a local certified dealer to enjoy a quick, easy buying experience. Using the TrueCar website or the TrueCar app, you can easily find a new or the used car you want. So when you're ready to buy the vehicle, it will do for you what a Louis Vuitton belt does for me. Visit TrueCar.com or download the TrueCar app to enjoy a better car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states. I had a brilliant thought this morning, which is, what could be more obscene than having a commercial for Milo during the Milo podcast read out by Milo? And as everyone knows, obscene ideas are the best ones. So here goes. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about the new sponsor we have on the show. It's not really a sponsor. It's just me talking about what I want during my own show. Which is that sponsor, that product, is me and my online shop, Swag by Milo. Swag by Milo features a constantly updated lineup of Milo merchandise, perfect for expressing your willingness to stand up to political correctness, not to mention your devotion to me, which I treasure more than the money, to be honest. In fact, since I'm on the subject, the money doesn't come to me at all. We do spend some remunerating our designers and our tech team, but the rest goes to the Milo Yiannopoulos Privilege Grant, which is a scholarship fund for young white males looking to go to college who are struggling to put the money together. Lots of news coming about the Privilege Grant this year. I've been hugely busy being famous, successful, popular, and fabulous, but there's plenty of news coming about the Privilege Grant soon, so stand by for a future show to hear more about that. I think actually that the Swag by Milo store deserves a full podcast to guide you through the amazing selections, but I'll just point out a few of my current favorites. Nothing will infuriate the leftists in your life more than a Feminism is Cancer t-shirt. Our best-selling item available for men and women. If you have a social justice warrior in your family, your dad might love a Stop Being a Feminist hoodie, which is part of our 7 Deadly Sins collection. I think it's Stop Being a Feminist, Stop Being a Cuck, Stop Being Fat, Stop Being Ugly, Stop Being a Globalist, and I can't remember what the other 2 are, but they're all great. We have accessories too, iPhone cases, and a Milo pillow, so you can take me to bed with you. I can be close to you even while you sleep. Students preparing to return to school, it's time to order your Milo posters, coffee cups, and other gear to guard you against the brainwashing you're sure to experience. Let me tell you, pulling out a bit of Milo swag in college during a gender studies lecture is the most fun you'll have all semester. One special announcement. There are no children's items available on Swag by Milo because I really hate kids. After this podcast, or during it if you want to be one of my most favoured acolytes, you can visit swagbymilo.com and pick up the latest Milo gear, all of which goes to a good cause. And not just a good cause, but a cause that winds up the bad people more than anything else.
Even though blue-haired social justice warriors hurl themselves off the Golden Gate Bridge when they hear us say it, this is the Milo Yiannopoulos Show.
We're back. You're listening to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I'm here with the legendary Chuck Dixon. Now, I said in the previous half we were going to talk politics. We're going to get straight down to it. Tell us about yours. You have different politics than the rest of the comic book industry, which is to say you're not insane. But get into a bit more detail. Well, you know, get into a little bit, just give us a brief, because, I think what people want to know is how reasonable it is for you to sort of get sniped at in these awful ways, having all your characters killed and having your cities nuked. I mean, a normal person would be sitting here thinking, maybe, what is he, a white supremacist? Is he a member of the KKK? And speaking to you, we've had a nice 15 minutes of enjoyable conversation so far. I'm guessing that's not the case. So talk us through, your basic political outlook. Who have you voted for in the past? What matters to you in this election? That sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I've always voted Republican. Here in the United States, you've got to hold your nose sometimes to vote Republican. But, I proudly voted for Reagan twice, reluctantly voted for others after that.
It's okay. You can say who they are. If they ran for president and didn't win, that means you can say anything about them. It doesn't matter because they're never going to be able to get you.
But yeah, I'm one of those guys that, Reagan didn't go far enough, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm a Genghis Khan far right.
Really? Well, splendid, Joe. I see now why you did this project and why you're going to rather start amassing fans in the Breitbart universe, even more so than already. Now, Clinton Cash. So for those who don't know, this is a book by Peter Schweitzer, who's one of the editors at Breitbart, who's been a New York Times bestseller. And the book sketches out all of the remarkable and, of course, completely coincidental times when Bill Clinton has been paid huge sums of money for speeches by private corporations and other individuals. And then magically, completely coincidentally, and in a totally unconnected way, Hillary Clinton has made some sort of political decision that then benefits those people. It's a sort of catalogue of remarkable coincidences, and it has been turned by Chuck into a graphic novel. Why did you say yes to this project?
Oh, I believed in it utterly. They were kind of in a spot because I was the only writer who writes at my level who would be willing to step into the light. Who just didn't give a damn. My bridges are already burned. So I wanted to do it. It was only trying to figure out the approach. Because as great as Peter's book is, it's not comic book friendly for adaptation.
Well, I was going to ask about this. It's not the first book I would choose for a graphic novel adaptation. I mean, there are no superheroes. There's no explosions. I guess there's a supervillain, perhaps two of them. But talk us through. That's interesting, actually. So talk us through the process. Were you left to sort of do this on your own? Were you just given a copy of the book and they sort of said, right, make that a graphic novel? And if so, how did you do it? I mean, how did you approach what is a very heavily footnoted, research-heavy, non-fiction book about funding and corruption? How did you even approach that project to turn it into art?
Well, first of all, I don't take any job until I know I can bring something to the party. So I told them, give me 24 hours, let me read the book and let me think about it. And I came back the next day and I told them what approach I wanted to take. Just a wild parody, satire, mockery. I wanted to bring some laughs to it. I promised them that I would make people laugh and I would make them feel appalled. I wrote about 4 pages. This was before any contracts were signed or anything else. I wrote 4 pages to give them an example of what I was going to do with the book. And Peter, God bless him, loved it. He understood what I was going to do, and he just let me go wild.
That's awesome. I have read it. I mean, it is hilarious. It's really funny in a way that these sort of mean, vindictive, feminist, it's so heavy-handed. We were talking earlier about, them not being very subtle. So heavy-handed the way they could have crowbar this stuff about microaggressions now into, this sort of far-left campus feminist politics into comic books now. And it's not subtle at all. And it's actually just simply not funny. The only people who laugh at this are sort of, it's a sort of bitter, hollow laugh, if you get one at all. But Clinton Cash is genuinely hilarious. I mean, it's funny. The artwork is so great. So I'm not going to claim to be the world's greatest and most voracious reader of graphic novels, but I did read the Sandman series when I was growing up, and of course most of and Preacher, which I liked a lot, and most of the famous ones, V for Vendetta and stuff like that. Obviously, I've flicked through things like that. So I have some understanding of the genre, and this is really quite a remarkable achievement, if you don't mind me saying. To turn Schweitzer's book into the book that you have come up with is really remarkable. What I want to know, though, is you kind of gone all in on the politics now with this project. As you say, your bridges were burned, so you thought, what the hell, let's do it. Do you think this is going to be an effective way? Do you think the comic book medium is going to be an effective way to get across to people that the Clintons are bad people, get across to people that conservatives aren't all horrific, and some of us even have a sense of humor, to prompt them to reappraise things. Because it seems to me that when the left does this heavy-handed politics, it never really takes very many people with it. Do you think that the right might have more chance to do it? How do you think this is really going to be effective?
Well, I mean, it's going to reach more people. I mean, you pick it up and you just open it. You can open it to any page, and there's something there to draw you in, or something ridiculous to look at.
They're all ridiculous things to look at.
Yeah, I mean, the maxim in comics used to be write every issue like one's first comic. So I made it as accessible, not dumbing it down, but made it as accessible and as engaging as I could, with the help of the artists, a great art team who were also willing to step into the light with me. So it's an attractive package. What can I say? And people are going to look at it. People who aren't necessarily a conservative persuasion. And the thing is these are horrific things the Clintons have done, and people need to know about them, and they need to be shown, even if it takes, silly cartoon drawings. They need to be shown and demonstrated the pattern of behavior these people had to basically enrich themselves off of third world countries, for God's sake.
When you put it like that, it does sound more like the kind of thing that a comic book, that a graphic novel might be made out of. The sort of.
No, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
this is proper supervillain territory, isn't it? Let's be honest. Pay for play politics and raping third world nations. I mean, this is the sort of thing you imagine Spectre or what's the one from the Avengers, the evil Nazi people in the Avengers. I can't remember, but
Hydra.
Hail Hydra. Yeah, of course. This is the sort of thing you expect those organizations to do, and of course, the nearest analogy isn't the Bush White House in Iraq. It's the Clintons, isn't it? I mean, they're the closest, just objectively speaking, they're the closest thing to sort of comic book supervillains.
Well, the story is packed with warlords. I mean, these people hung out with warlords, going to Walmart. I mean, they were just, partying down with guys wearing silly uniforms, comic opera uniforms, and enslaving their own people. I mean, it's just insane.
My good friend General Natugo or whatever. So now I'm told, and I don't think these figures are public, but I have been told from a reliable source that the entire first printing of this book sold out on Amazon. Tell us what the reception has been. I mean, that suggests to me that you're going to sell a lot of copies of this. So many, even perhaps, it ranks alongside the earlier work that you've done that's been more sort of purely artistic. There's a possibility this becomes, quite a little sensation. The movie's done very well. The book's done phenomenally well. This could be the sort of third item in the Clinton cash trifecta, it seems to me. What sort of reception have you had, both personally, from other people within the industry? Have they been horrified by it? And what's been the reception from readers? Because presumably you, as I do, get a lot of direct feedback from people who like your stuff, who come into contact with it. So give me a sense of how people have received this book.
In the industry, amongst my peers, I don't think the other shoe has dropped yet. I don't think they're really realizing what this is, and I don't think they realize the power that it will have. Because I anticipate it's going to sell huge. I did an adaptation of Amity Shley's The Forgotten Man a couple of years ago, which sold extraordinarily well. I mean, it sold better than any superhero comic when it came out. and it was number one in the New York Times graphic novel for 2 weeks.
Would you be depressed if this was
huge numbers?
Would you be depressed if this turned out to be the highest selling thing you've ever done, or would you be happy?
Yeah. I'd be very happy. I'd be very happy because to get the word out, and I own a piece of it. So.
No, I mean, I felt like I should ask because it's sort of like, if you do this sort of, many, many, many years of like the pure artistic stuff, and then one day you're like, oh God, damn it, let's just do it. Clinton Cash, and it becomes the biggest thing of your career. I just wonder as an artist, what your response to that would be. But of course, you'd be fine with it.
Yeah, I want eyes on the page. This has the potential to be an enormous seller and reach a lot of people I've never reached before who don't know who I am, never read my work. So yeah, I couldn't be happier.
I think that's true, actually. One of the things I like about this, and your writing in this book, but also about the idea of it at all, is that it's part, I think, of a new kind of conservatism. And some of Trump's younger college-educated sort of waspish, meme, internet-savvy fans, a lot of my readers and a lot of your soon-to-be readers are realizing actually that there's a fun, dissident, mischievous strand in conservatism, which I think people can hear in the conversation I'm having with you. You know, we laugh in a way the left doesn't anymore because they're too busy, you know, hectoring and pandering and being very earnest and pearl clutching and worrying about sexism and racism and seeing it everywhere. It seems to me that if you want to be punk and mischievous and alternative these days, you kind of have to be a Republican, which is a remarkable reversal from the last sort of 10, 15 years. So the idea that this sort of hilariously brilliant graphic novel by one of the biggest names in the industry about all of the, you know, machinations and, as Christopher Hitchens put it, triangulations of the Clintons. Such a great word, isn't that great?
Yes, it is.
Hitchens had the same talent, I think, that Larkin, the poet, had, which is, you know, maybe not the best at anything except once in a while picking just the perfect word. You know, actually Trump has it too, you know, with his little like crooked Hillary and little Marco and all this stuff. It's just the right word. The triangulations of Bill Clinton. It's so perfect. Anyway, I'm really excited about this. And as I say, I have read it and I promise I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass because we're having an enjoyable conversation, but I did love it. It was just on its own merits, a wonderful graphic novel. I mean, it's funny. It's shocking. By the end of it, you want to sort of kill yourself and buy 50 copies of it for everyone you know. It's a really great thing. I mean, I loved it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
This has been such an enjoyable conversation, so I hope you'll come on again. I know that a lot of the listeners to this show and readers at Breitbart are starting to get more interested in culture war stuff, whether it's video games and Gamergate, whether it is comic books, whether it is sci-fi and fantasy. I want to ask you a couple more questions, if you don't mind, just about the culture war stuff. It seems to me that comic books, sci-fi and fantasy fell quite quickly and quite easily to the social justice invasion and are now policed quite heavily from within. Their own people sort of self-policing and doing all of these terrible, ridiculous reimaginings. Video games weren't quite like that. Video games, you know, the video game studios, the publishers, they were all pretty spineless, even when they agreed, even when they were writing to me privately and saying, keep it up, mate. But video game fans stood up to all this stuff, rejected the poor quality journalism, rejected these bonkers feminist readings of their games, asked for evidence. You know, where's the measurable harm here? The religious right was saying video games made you violent in the 90s. That wasn't true then. Why is it true now they can make you sexist? So they really held these guys to account. Why do you think it didn't happen in comic books? Is it just because the readership is so much smaller and less well organized? What's the difference? Why hasn't there been more of a resistance? Because if it's true that these things are not commercially successful, as of course social justice never is. If these things aren't commercially successful, if they collapse after issue 2 or 3, these awful reboots and sort of vandalism of old characters, if it's something that readers don't want, why aren't readers speaking more loudly about it in the comic book industry?
Well, because they've chased so much of the readership away. People have simply stopped reading comics. Began in the 90s when the comic book companies voluntarily pulled off the newsstand. So the comics were more readily available. They became a boutique industry just in comic shops. And
why did that happen? Was that poor sales?
90% of people never go in a comic shop. So
was that poor sales? Did they do that because it wasn't worth it?
No. There was a lot of business reasons. None of them were good decisions. I knew from my royalty statements that most of my royalty payments came from the newsstand, came from casual readers. Yeah. You know, picking up a comic now and then. Right. When they pulled off the newsstand, royalties shrunk, you know, by 80%.
Wow.
So they were leaving real money on the table and never interested in going back and trying to find that audience again. I mean, here in the United States, in almost every supermarket, at the checkout aisle in the impulse pockets, there's a little pocket that has an Archie comic in it. And Archie is the most irrelevant comic book character I can possibly imagine. And yet they are successful in that market. And Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, nowhere to be seen because the people running those characters are not interested in those readers. They are only interested in the shrinking fan base that they have. I have literally proposed all ages or universally mainstream ideas to comic companies and been told that's not the audience we want.
Right. So some of this has been driven by the industry themselves. They seem to think that going in this social justice direction is good business, and it's quite evidently turning out not to be the case. And I suppose it's being propped up for now from the, I'm sure, vast profits they're making from the Hollywood remakes, but that's got to run out at some point. Does it worry you, the sort of lack of artistic integrity that there seems to now be in the comic book industry? I mean, once the money from Hollywood runs out and is spent quite quickly, as I'm sure it will be, what's the future of the comic book industry, and what are they going to do?
Well, I mean, there's no sense worrying about it. I mean, the game is over. Yeah, eventually the superhero movie cycle will end. And there's already noise at both major companies because they're owned by multinational entertainment conglomerates worth billions and billions of dollars. There's already noise that, why are you doing new comics? You have all this stuff you could just reprint. Who cares? Mm. And because the comics aren't profitable on their own as publications, the parent companies have every right to question that. Say, why aren't you more popular?
I see.
Everybody knows who Thor and Iron Man and Superman and Batman are, and they're popular, and the movies make bajillions of money. Why don't the comics sell more? Because they're crap. That's why they don't sell more.
Excellent. Tell us what else is going on. You've finished this project now. When is the book out? Tell us.
August 8th is the official drop date, but you can order on Amazon now.
You can pre-order it now. Fine. So by the time you listen to this show, it will be out in a couple of days. You can pre-order it immediately on Amazon. I was at the premiere of the movie in Cannes and then another premiere of the movie at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland a while ago, and there were copies floating about of Clinton Cash, the graphic novel. And it looks lovely. It's a beautiful thing. So I encourage you to go check it out. Thank you so much for spending time with me. And I know that I'm definitely going to want you back on a future show. So you're going to have to, I'm sorry to say, endure another conversation like this at some point in the next 6 months, because I would love to have you back and talk to you more about this stuff.
Well, I look forward to that.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. Thanks a lot, Chuck Dixon.
All right. Thank you, Milo.